Welcome to the debate. Imagine standing in the tunnel at AT&T Stadium today, July 6th, 2026. The atmosphere in Arlington is just, well, it's electric.
Oh, absolutely deafening, I'm sure.
Right, but down in that tunnel, the contrast is really what makes this 42nd Iberian Derby so compelling. On one side, you have a Spanish machine under Luis de la Fuente that, hasn't lost a match in 34 tries.
Yeah, perfectly calibrated to systematically suffocate its opponents.
Exactly. And on the other side, a 41-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo staring down the very real possibility that a loss tonight brings an immediate, undeniable end to his unparalleled international career.
The stakes literally could not be higher.
No, they really couldn't. So the question we are exploring today is this. Are we looking at a scenario where individual brilliance and, dynamic disruption can actually shatter a perfectly calibrated tactical machine? Or does the machine inevitably grind down the individual?
I think we both know where we stand on this.
I look at this Portuguese squad and I see a very specific, highly viable blueprint for victory, built on an elite midfield and a capacity to thrive in chaos.
And, well, I look at that exact same pitch and see Spain's absolute dominance in possession, coupled with a virtually impenetrable defense, making a Spanish victory really the only logical outcome tonight. It is structural perfection for a reason.
Well, let's unpack that structural perfection, because I think the concept of perfection in football is entirely dependent on who is actually texting it, right?
Sure, but
Spain relies heavily on predictability. They want to dictate the tempo, control every single phase of play, and essentially put the match to sleep while they have the ball.
which they do better than anyone in the world.
They do, but Portugal doesn't need to control the match to win it. They are built to thrive in the margins, in the broken transitions. We saw this just 13 months ago in the 2025 UEFA Nations League final.
I knew you'd bring that up.
I have to. Spain tried to run this exact same machine. They took the lead twice, Portugal fought back twice, dragging Spain into the deep waters and eventually winning on penalties. That wasn't a fluke.
Okay, but
Portugal's midfield, João Neves, Vitinha, and Bruno Fernandes, they have this rare combination of technical proficiency and vertical urgency. They are specifically engineered to exploit the vast, empty spaces that Spain inherently leaves behind when they push their fullbacks high.
look, I understand leaning on the Nations League final, but that feels like looking at a single puzzle piece and just, ignoring the enormous picture that this Spanish team has painted since then.
It was a pretty big puzzle piece.
Yeah, but since that match, Spain is on a 34-match unbeaten run. They're right on the precipice of tying their golden era record from 2007 to 2009. But it's not just that they aren't losing, it's how they are playing here in North America.
You mean the possession stats?
Not just possession. They currently hold a plus 1.80 expected goals difference per game at this tournament.
Right, the XG.
Exactly. And for people not swimming in data every day, expected goals, or XG, measures the mathematical quality of a team's scoring chances. A plus 1.80 difference means Spain isn't just scraping by. The underlying math shows they are generating nearly 2 full goals worth of pristine scoring opportunities more than their opponents. Every single match.
Which is impressive against Austria in the round of 32, sure.
It's the highest metric for a European team progressing past the group stage since France in 1998. They cruise past Austria without even breaking a sweat. Now contrast that with Portugal arriving in Dallas.
Oh, here we go.
They barely survived a grueling match against Croatia. They required a stoppage-time header from Gonzalo Ramos and, let's be honest, the grace of Sneeko technology.
Hey, the technology's there for a reason.
Sure, that little microchip sensor inside the match ball that detects the faintest grays just to rule out a Croatian equalizer. Spain's ability to sedate the pace of the game will simply starve Portugal of the oxygen required to generate that chaotic transition game you're relying on.
You frame that Croatia match as a weakness, but surviving an exhausting, emotional crucible like that against the possession-heavy team, that is exactly the kind of stress test that forges a tournament-winning mentality.
Or it just exhausts you before you play the best team in the world.
I disagree. It forces a team to adapt. But okay, let's take this down from the overarching tournament form to the actual tactical battleground where this match will be decided, right? The center of the pitch.
Absolutely.
Playing against Spain's midfield right now is often described as being trapped inside a giant 90-minute rondo drill. They stretch you horizontally, pulling your defense wider and wider until, boom, a vertical seam snaps open.
Like a metronome.
Right, exactly like a metronome. But my perspective is that Portugal's midfield is uniquely built to be the wrench that shatters those gears.
Yeah, I have to push back really hard on that. Because the Spanish metronome is operated by Rodri and Pedri, and they do not let wrenches into the gears.
They haven't met a wrench like Vitinha yet.
Look, they're the absolute heartbeat of this 4-2-3-1 system. Rodri in particular, he doesn't just casually pass the ball around. He uses possession as a tool to actively manipulate the opposition's defensive block.
He beat for the press.
Exactly. He will intentionally hold the ball a fraction of a second longer than necessary. He actively wants a Portuguese midfielder to step toward him, because the moment that player commits, Rodri pivots and breaks the first line of defense with surgical precision, exploiting the exact space that player just vacated.
Right, but
And ahead of him, you have Dani Olmo thriving, and Alex Baena, who has brought an entirely new dimension to the left flank. When Spain dictates the tempo, they aren't just resting on the ball, they hold it to physically and mentally exhaust the opponent. Portugal's midfield is incredibly talented, I'll give you that. But they are going to spend 70% of this match chasing shadows, burning the very energy they need for those transitions.
But you're assuming Portugal is just going to passively accept being stretched, just playing right into Rodri's hands. But Roberto Martinez explicitly stated after the Croatia win that this is a clash of two teams that fundamentally want the ball. Portugal is not going to sit in a deep, passive defensive shell and wait to be exhausted. Look at the personnel.
Okay.
João Neves and Vitinha just won a second consecutive Champions League with Paris Saint-Germain. They play against European elites every single week. Vitinha specifically has this phenomenal, almost sixth sense to receive the ball on the half turn.
He is brilliant on the turn, yes.
Right, meaning before the ball even reaches his boots, his body is already angled towards Spain's goal. He doesn't have to stop, control the ball, and then look up. He takes it in stride, fully aware of the space around him.
But he has to get the ball first.
And he will. So when Rodri steps up to orchestrate, Vitinha and Neves have the technical resistance to break Spain's press. And when they break that press, the dominoes fall incredibly fast. They immediately launch Rafael Leao into the wide-open acres of space that Pedro Porro vacates when he bombs forward.
That's a huge if, though.
The disruption isn't just about destroying Spain's rhythm. It's about forcing a turnover in the middle third and executing a lethal 3-second transition before Spain can even blink.
Yeah, but that entirely hinges on Portugal cleanly winning the ball and Vitinha actually getting the time to utilize that half-turn. But the mechanics of Spain's out-of-possession game are designed precisely to prevent that from ever happening.
You mean the Gegenpress?
Press, meaning the instant they lose the ball, instead of retreating backward to build a defensive wall, their front line, Olmo, Baena, Oyarzabal, they actually sprint forward.
They swarm.
They swarm the ball carrier immediately. They use the sideline as an extra defender to trap a player like Vitinha, giving him literally less than a second to process his surroundings. Meanwhile, Rodri steps up aggressively to cut off the 4 passing lanes to Bruno Fernandes. It's a suffocating net.
It is, but...
And let's address the hypothetical where Portugal does manage to launch that perfect counterattack. You are talking about transitions slamming into a Spanish defense that simply refuses to break. We have to acknowledge Unai Simon here.
Oh, the record, sure.
He just broke Walter Zinga's 36-year-old World Cup record. Simon has gone 519 consecutive minutes without conceding a goal. The backline of Porro, Pau Cubarsí, Emerick Laporte, and Marco Correa has neutralized every single threat in North America. They haven't conceded once.
It is a remarkable statistical achievement. I won't deny that. 519 minutes is historic, but context is everything here.
Context doesn't erase 519 clean minutes.
No, but can we truly trust those defensive metrics when Spain hasn't faced an attack possessing the sheer chaotic individual dynamism of Portugal? It's like looking at a perfectly engineered suspension bridge and praising its stability because it handles daily commuter traffic effortlessly.
Austria isn't just commuter traffic.
They aren't Portugal. That bridge hasn't been subjected to a specific harmonic resonance yet. The kind of unique localized stress that makes concrete crumble. Spain's defense is largely untested by genuine vertical aggression at this tournament.
I disagree.
And historically, the Iberian Derby strips away the sterile tactical superiority Spain usually enjoys over lesser opponents. I bring you back to the 2018 World Cup Classic in Sochi, the 3-3 draw. Spain's defense was heralded as impenetrable then, too.
That was 8 years ago.
Yet, when faced with raw vertical speed, they cracked. We saw it again in that 2025 Nations League final. Spain surrendered leads twice to players like Nuno Mendes, who was attacking aggressively from the fullback position.
Right, but
When you have Bruno Fernandes orchestrating the final third with one-touch through balls and Rafael Leao driving at a backpedaling 19-year-old Pau Cubarsí, a 519-minute clean sheet record can evaporate in 10 seconds.
look, I hear the historical parallels, but we need to look at the underlying architecture of why those past results happened versus why this current streak exists. The 2018 match was, as I said, 8 years ago, played under an entirely different Spanish managerial philosophy.
The philosophy of possession hasn't changed that much.
Today's defensive solidity under De La Fuente isn't just about having 4 good defenders at the back. It's about how the entire team defends with the ball. Spain's defense doesn't start with Cubarsí and Laporte, it starts with their wingers keeping the ball.
Sure, possession as defense.
Exactly. If Portugal never has the ball, Spain's backline never has to actually defend in those isolated one-on-one scenarios you're describing. They sedate the game at the source. And when you say they haven't faced a unique stress test, you are heavily relying on the premise that Portugal's attack will function flawlessly.
I am.
But that brings us to the most complex variable on the pitch, which fundamentally alters how Portugal operates: Cristiano Ronaldo.
Well, yeah. I think it's impossible to talk about the tactical geometry of this match without talking about how Ronaldo's presence physically and psychologically alters it.
Psychologically, sure.
The narrative is monumental, right? It's his final World Cup, the culmination of 23 years of international football. But beyond the romance, let's look at the hard facts of this tournament. He already has 3 goals.
Yeah, he's still lethal in the box.
He became the oldest player to ever score in a knockout match. He is the first human being to score in 6 different World Cups. But the tactical value is heavily tied to his psychological edge. He scored a hat-trick against Spain in 2018, including that 88th minute free kick. He knows intimately how to manipulate Spanish center backs.
But he's 41 now.
Knowing this is his absolute final World Cup provides an unparalleled motivational force. He plays with absolute finality and zero fear. Tactically, he occupies both Cubarsí and Laporte simply by existing in the penalty area. His gravity pulls them deep, and that is exactly what creates the pockets of space at the top of the box for a player like Bruno Fernandes to exploit.
The historical achievements are undeniable, I'll give you that. But we have to separate the romantic media narrative from the cold, tactical reality of a high-stakes knockout match in 2026.
It's not just a media narrative, it's tactical gravity.
The question isn't whether Ronaldo is a legend. We know he is. The tactical question is whether a 41-year-old forward is actually a hindrance against a Spanish side that demands absolute physical perfection from its opponents.
A hindrance?
Yes. Let's look at the mechanics of what happened against Croatia in the round of 32. Roberto Martinez hauled Ronaldo off in the 81st minute. Why? Because Portugal's attack had completely stagnated?
They were exhausted.
No, they needed Goncalo Ramos to come on and act as a dynamic, highly mobile focal point who could actually press the Croatian defense. Ramos comes on, the pressing structure is restored, and Ramos scores the stoppage time winner. Playing a static forward against a Spanish team that exploits the slightest lack of movement, that plays perfectly into Luis de la Fuente's hands.
But evaluating Ronaldo against a modern metric like defensive pressing fundamentally misunderstands his role in Martinez's specific system for this match. He isn't out there to trigger a high-intensity gegenpress like a 22-year-old. His role is offensive gravity.
But wait, that lack of pressing is exactly the structural flaw Spain will exploit.
How so?
Modern elite football, especially against a possession juggernaut like Spain, requires all 11 players to operate as a cohesive defensive unit out of possession. It operates like a chain. If your number 9 does not press Spain's center backs, Laporte and Cubarsí suddenly have unopposed time on the ball to pick their passes.
They still have to pass through Portugal's midfield.
They can effortlessly bypass Portugal's first line of engagement and feed Rodri. If one link in the chain is static, the entire pressing structure collapses behind it. Spain will exploit that numerical advantage in the build-up phase every single time.
I think you're underestimating the midfield's cover.
It forces Portugal's midfield trio, Neves, Vitinha, and Fernandes, to step up and cover an impossible amount of ground. That exhausts them. And if they are exhausted from chasing the ball because the press failed at the front, their ability to launch those lethal transitions you mentioned earlier, completely nullified.
That's a very rigid view of pressing.
Tactically speaking, keeping a player who cannot press on the pitch for 90 minutes against this specific opponent is an enormous liability.
Well, that assumes Spain's buildup is perfectly immune to alternative forms of disruption. Yes, Ronaldo might not press with the relentless intensity of a younger forward, but his specific type of offensive gravity forces Spain to fundamentally adjust their defensive line.
I don't think they'll adjust at all.
Because he is so lethal inside the penalty area, Spain cannot afford to play their traditional high defensive line without absorbing extreme risk. If Spain drops their defensive line even 5 or 10 yards deeper, out of respect for his movement in the box, it stretches the distance between Spain's backline and Rodri in the midfield.
That's a big if.
But if they do, that exact pocket of space, the area known as Zone 14 right at the top of the penalty area, is where Bruno Fernandes operates better than almost anyone in world football. If Ronaldo pushes the center backs deep, he gives Bruno the keys to the game.
I see the theory, but
Furthermore, you have to factor in his aerial superiority on set pieces. In tight, razor-thin knockout matches where open play is suffocated by possession, a single corner kick often proves to be the deciding factor. The substitution against Croatia wasn't Martinez conceding that Ronaldo is a liability. It was a manager utilizing the depth of his squad to change the physical profile of the attack late in a grueling game.
right.
Against Spain, the psychological intimidation and the spatial manipulation he brings to the Iberian derby, those are assets you simply cannot quantify with an expected goals model.
Look, I understand the theory of his gravity pulling the defense deep, but we have to look at the actual mechanics of how Spain defends under De La Fuente. They do not drop their line.
They might have to tonight.
They compress the pitch. They maintain a high defensive line because they trust Unai Simon to operate as a sweeper-keeper behind them. And more importantly, they trust their counterpress to prevent the pass to Bruno Fernandes from ever being played in the first place.
You're assuming perfection from Spain.
If Portugal is forced to bypass that midfield press by launching long, hopeful balls over the top, Aymeric Laporte is going to win those aerial duels against a 41-year-old forward 9 times out of 10.
I wouldn't bet against Ronaldo in the air.
The romanticism of a final stand is beautiful. It really is. But on the grass, tactical systems dictate outcomes. Spain's system is flawless right now. They haven't conceded in 519 minutes because they systematically eliminate the chaos before it can even manifest on the pitch. They do not allow matches to devolve into emotional end-to-end shootouts.
They didn't in the group stage, sure.
They sedate the game. And a sedated, tightly controlled game inevitably heavily favors the team that holds the ball for 65% of the time.
And yet, history tells us time and time again that international knockout football is rarely a sterile equation played out on a spreadsheet. Emotion, momentum, and the crushing weight of the occasion, they invariably warp tactical systems.
Sometimes.
When we pull back and look at the whole board, Portugal possesses a highly specific, tested set of tools required to dismantle the Spanish machine. Their dynamic midfield of Neves, Vitinha, and Fernandes has the technical pedigree to survive the press and launch devastating transitions.
If they get the ball.
Their emotional momentum, galvanized by the sheer finality of Ronaldo's legendary career, provides an intangible edge that metrics just can't measure. And their head-to-head success in the 2025 Nations League proves they have a legitimate blueprint. They do not need to dominate possession to win. They simply need to engineer specific moments of chaos, which their personnel is perfectly built to do.
But you cannot engineer chaos if you are constantly chasing shadows. While I respect the sheer danger Portugal poses in those transitional moments, Spain's systematic superiority is overwhelmingly potent. Spain's historical 34-match unbeaten run, their flawless defensive record at this tournament, and their suffocating metric-leading possession game make them heavily justified favorites.
Favorites? Maybe. Invincible? No.
Relying on emotional momentum and an aging superstar is an incredibly fragile strategy against a team that operates with the cold, ruthless efficiency of De La Fuente's Spain. They will dictate the tempo, exhaust Portugal's midfield, and eventually the structural integrity of the Spanish machine will grind down Portuguese resistance.
Well, if there's one thing we can absolutely agree on, it's that this entire match will hinge on the opening phases of the midfield battle, right?
Oh, 100%.
Whichever trio, Neves, Vitinha, and Fernandes for Portugal, or Rodri, Pedri, and Olmo for Spain, whichever group can successfully impose their philosophy in the first 30 minutes will establish the tactical baseline for the entire evening. If Spain settles into their rondo early and sedates the crowd, it will be an incredibly long, exhausting night for Portugal.
Absolutely.
But if Portugal can force those early turnovers and inject vertical chaos right into the heart of the Spanish defense, the entire dynamic of the match shifts.
Exactly. The real narrative of this match lies in those microscopic tactical nuances in the center of the pitch, far beyond the superficial headlines. Grasping the complexity of what these two vastly different managers are trying to achieve physically and spatially requires looking at the game from multiple perspectives.
Well said. We've peeled back the layers of a 105-year-old rivalry today, looking past the surface to understand how the deeply rooted tactical philosophies of possession and control versus transition and chaos will physically manifest on the pitch tonight.
It's going to be fascinating to watch.
It really is. There is a wealth of fascinating tactical analysis in the material we've discussed, and I encourage everyone to explore it further to fully appreciate the mechanics of this matchup. The ultimate prediction, as always, is strictly up to you, the listener. Whether Dallas becomes the graveyard of a legend or the site where the Spanish machine is finally shattered, the margins are razor thin. Thank you for joining us on The Debate.